A man takes advantage of a helpless lady who has lost her memory, all in an effort to take over her wealth. However, the story takes a surprising turn at the end. If you're planning to watch this movie, what you're about to learn will leave you shocked. So grab your popcorn and let's dive in. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to discuss another interesting and popular Nigerian movie. It's not your typical movie, so stay tuned for all the fun, twists, and turns. The movie starts with an old security man who is very friendly to everyone around him. He stands at the bus stop, talking to a lady and encouraging her since there is no bus. He also chats with his friend, who speaks Chinese, before heading home. When he gets home, he finds everything in chaos, with his son eating the last of the soup and not cleaning up after himself. The old man disturbs his son's sleep and scolds him for his behavior. Meanwhile, his son, Ego, is on a phone call with a lady, bragging about the good life he is living. His father interrupts, which causes Ego to end the call. The father advises him to stop living a fake life, but Ego takes it the wrong way. He explains how his mother lived the same way and ended up with nothing. Ego argues that he will leave and make it big, just as his father advises him to learn to appreciate the little things. Ego angrily packs his things, ready to leave. The father, though relieved, urges him to do something meaningful with his life. On his way out, Ego sees a lady who has been in an accident. He takes some valuables from her and rushes her to the hospital. The doctor asks about his relationship with the woman, and Ego claims to be a good Samaritan. Later, Ego goes to see his father, now with a car and a woman by his side, claiming that he's made it. The father is disappointed because he doesn't know where Ego's money is coming from, and he rebukes him before Ego leaves again. The next day, the doctor tells Ego that the woman, Temi, has partial memory loss and needs her family to help her recover her memory. Ego lies to the doctor, claiming that he is her boyfriend. He explains that he didn't reveal this earlier to avoid trouble. But now that she's improving, he will do his best to help her recover. Ego reflects on what his father said, and while hurt, he sees this situation as an opportunity to change his life and start making smart decisions. He celebrates his plans in his room. Meanwhile, Temi's friend, Judith, has been worried about her for weeks. She and her colleague discuss their concerns as they continue with their day-to-day activities. One day, after enjoying himself with an unknown girl, Ego goes through the things he took from Temi during the accident. He turns on her phone, and a call comes in from someone asking about its owner. Ego explains that Temi is recovering and gives the caller the hospital's address. Judith and others arrive at the hospital, where the doctor explains Temi's condition. He advises them not to try to make her remember too quickly, as it could harm her. He tells Judith that Ego is the only one who can help Temi at this point. When Temi hears that Ego is supposed to be her boyfriend, she reluctantly accepts it for the sake of her health. A few days later, Temi is discharged from the hospital, and Ego, along with Judith, takes her home. Temi is informed about the doctor's advice not to stay upstairs due to her condition, so they take her to a room downstairs. Judith isn't happy about Ego's actions. That evening, Ego reflects on his father's constant rejection of his actions, especially regarding the house he was given. Ego decides that once he gets what he wants, he will leave the country. The next day, while Ego is in the living room, a lady knocks at the door. Ego introduces her as his cousin to Temi, and they exchange pleasantries. Ego follows the woman to her room, but Temi tries to get his attention, though he ignores her. Inside the room, Lydia asks Ego why he introduced her as his cousin to Temi, but Ego offers a vague proverb she doesn't understand. He gives Lydia expensive gifts, and they enjoy their time together. After she leaves, Temi asks Ego who she was, sensing something is wrong. Ego tells her all kinds of stories to explain Lydia's presence, playing on her emotions to gain her trust. Afterward, Ego expresses his love for Temi before leaving. The next day, Judith brings in a maid to help with the house chores. Temi asks Judith to send a large sum of money to Ego's account urgently. Though Judith is skeptical, she follows Temi's instructions and shows the maid, Vera, to her room. Later, Ego returns home and is surprised to see a maid in the house. He's pleased as it will reduce his stress and asks about the money. Vera tells him the good news, and Ego asks her to go upstairs to his room, but she insists on going with him. He uses the doctor's advice as an excuse to avoid her, and though she suggests he sleep in her room, he avoids it by emotionally manipulating her. They both understand each other's intentions. The following day, Temi talks to the new gateman about his work, finding him amusing. Ego arrives and, after hearing about the new gateman, is a bit upset that he wasn't informed. However, he offers the gateman an extra 50,000 naira a month, which surprises Temi. The gateman, remaining silent, accepts since he will be working for Ego's son. Later that day, Ego has a meeting with his father. He tells him to focus on his work while Ego does his own thing, and they both leave. The father, however, is aware that his son's actions aren't good and calls a friend for advice, unsure if Ego will get exposed. The next day, Ego arrives home with another woman, disappointing his father as he opens the gate for them. While they enjoy their time in the living room, Vera expresses concern for Temi's well-being. Ego and his girlfriend shut her down, calling her wicked and warning her not to overstep her boundaries. They chase Vera away and go to their room. The following day, Ego arrives with the same woman and tells her to go to his room because of her rudeness. Temi asks who she is, and Ego claims she is his cousin from his father's side, offering a convincing story. He goes with her to the room. In the living room later, Ego's cousin is on a loud phone call, which Temi asks her to lower. Instead, the woman calls Temi by name, using her memory loss against her. Vera stands up for Temi, but the cousin slaps her. When Ego arrives, the cousin pretends to cry, and Ego, not listening to Temi's side of the story, leaves with her. Temi begins to wonder what is really going on. The next day, Temi apologizes to Ego, who tells her he's putting his life on hold to help her, but she keeps complaining about his cousin. His emotional speech makes Temi cry, and Ego leaves angrily. Later, Judith visits Temi and comforts her. Temi reveals that she's independent and strong, but that hasn't been her reality. Judith consoles her before leaving. Soon after, Ego returns with food for Temi, apologizing. She appreciates it, but then Ego goes to her room and steals her expensive gold jewelry to sell. His father sees him leaving and goes to Temi, though it's difficult for him. Ego's father reveals to Temi that Ego has been using her and taking advantage of her wealth. He explains that he couldn't keep quiet because of Temi's kindness. Temi is shocked and finally understands everything. Later, Ego goes to sell the jewelry at a building site, but can't reach the buyer. He then seeks help from a friend skilled in IT to transfer money from an account, convincing him that the account holder may not remember if it contains money. His friend refuses, sensing Ego's fraudulent intentions. Ego leaves angrily, but on his way home, the authorities arrest him as he has been exposed. He tries to bribe them, but they take him back to the house. When Ego arrives at the house, he's shocked to see Temi walking. He tries to call her sweet names, but she shuts him down and calls him names. The woman he claimed was his cousin is actually Temi's cousin. They had planned this to get closer to Ego and figure out his true intentions. Temi reveals all the spy work she had set up to trap him, including the maid and his father's involvement. Ego tries to run away but can't. His father tells him how he had warned him about his lifestyle and its consequences. Temi explains everything to the police, and they ignore Ego's attempts to justify himself. He is taken away as Temi finally sees the truth. This story teaches us the importance of being content with what we have and never living to impress others. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to this amazing channel. Stay tuned for more interesting, captivating, and educational Nigerian movies.